mawawalan ng trabaho.
In cases like these, how should employees empower themselves when it comes to enforcing their employment rights? How can employers uphold the standards of their employees' working conditions? Where can employees go to report instances of violations of the labor code?
Good evening. You are watching Legal Help Desk on the Solar News Channel. This show is about making the law work for you by giving legal advice on topics that matter to you. I'm Attorney Karen Jimeno.
And I'm Attorney Rod.
May 1 is celebrated around the world as Labor Day, especially in the Philippines because on this day in 1903, Filipinos held a rally in front of the Malacanang Palace demanding for workers' rights. In 1974, the Labor Code of the Philippines was enacted into law, governing employment practices and labor relations such as the rules of hiring and terminating employees, the conditions of work including work hours, overtime, benefits, and holiday pays, as well as the guidelines in the organization and membership in labor unions.
Ang batas pagawa na tinutukoy natin ay yung Labor Code PD 446 as amended na matagal na yung naisa batas sa pamamagitan ng Presidential Decree. No? At yan ngayon ang gumagabay sa mundo ng paggawa dito sa Pilipinas. May mga specific provisions yan na which governs the working conditions, labor rights, and everything that has something to do with labor and employment matters altogether. Itong mga karapatang ito ng mga manggagawa, binabantayan yan ng Department of Labor and Employment at may specific rules and regulations governing the exercise of those.
However, there are some companies that do not meet the standards of the Labor Code of the Philippines, such as exceeding the recommended number of working hours or not entitling employees to benefits and holiday pays.
Mandato ng Department of Labor and Employment na huwag mawala ang mga trabahong nandiyan na. Pinipreserve natin yung mga trabahong naririyan na at lumilikha pa tayo ng mga bagong trabaho na makakadagdag sa mga pangangailangan ng mga manggagawa. Conciliation, mediation, function ng Department of Labor and Employment is very important to us. Anong ibig sabihin nun? Pinapagkasundo ka agad upang huwag matuloy ang pagwiwelga. Kapag nagwelga, magsasara ang kumpanya, maraming mawawalan ng trabaho.
In cases like these, how should employees empower themselves when it comes to enforcing their employment rights? How can employers uphold the standards of their employees' working conditions? Where can employees go to report instances of violations of the labor code?
Good evening. You are watching Legal Help Desk on the Solar News Channel. This show is about making the law work for you by giving legal advice on topics that matter to you. I'm Attorney Karen Jimeno.
And I'm Attorney Rod Nepomuceno. Tonight we will discuss your legal rights on working conditions. What you need to know as an employee on the proper working conditions according to the Labor Code, and what you need to do as an employer to uphold these standards.
Our guests for tonight are Representative Rene Magtubo of the Partido Manggagawa and Attorney Sonny Matula, National President of the Federation of Free Workers. Good evening and thank you for being with us tonight.
Yeah, good evening.
Gabi po.
Yeah, good evening. So Attorney Sonny and Congressman Rene, or the former Congressman Rene. Rene na lang. So, well, of course, as we all know, no, I mean, a lot of people are affected by the labor code because there are a lot of people obviously are either employers or employees, and maraming, let's face it, maraming normally mga disagreements or should we say mga conflicts na nangyayari.
Or I think a lot of also unclear notions about rights of either yung employers, what you should give your employees, or even employees what they're entitled to.
But since labor law is very, I guess, wide in terms of scope, siguro with focus more on working conditions, on specific working conditions and siguro we start off with what is defined as yung normal working hours. Diba? Kasi there are different types of employees and we'll touch on those. But siguro as we'll focus on yung typical employee and how we define what is normal working hours in I guess in a work day. Yes.
Under the labor code, the normal hours of work is 8 hours. And that is not only in accordance with the labor code, but it's also in accordance with ILO Convention number 1.
8 hours.
That was adopted in the year 1919. That was the first convention, the respect for the 8-hour.
Attorney Sonny,
minimum
when you
work
say
day.
8 hours, does that mean that if you go beyond 8 hours, you can refuse to stop working?
Yes, because the normal hours of work is 8 hours. It should be, in normal times, it should be observed. But of course, there are some exceptions.
When can an employer require an employee to go overtime? So I guess we have to make this clear to our viewers out there. If your employer asks you to go overtime, is that mandatory that you have to say yes?
It's not mandatory and it's not compulsory except those circumstances under Article 89 of the Labor Code.
So those
Attorney
are
Rene, sorry, Representative Rene, ano yung mga instances when you can force your employee to render overtime work?
Una, hindi siya compulsory. Then, kung pumayag ang mga employees at for emergency work for purpose of maintaining yung kanilang viability ng negosyo. Tapos, second, kung mayroong collective bargaining agreement, halimbawa, na stipulated doon sa agreement na meron silang overtime work for this period of time. Upon consultation with the employees, pwede mag-overtime. Pero it's not mandatory for the workers to render overtime sa employers.
But may mga conditions din yan, no, Rene, no? Like for example, di ba yung mga types of emergency or war or let's say yung equipment, yung equipment needs to be...
Attorney Sonny.
Yung unang pwedeng ma-compel, no, compulsory overtime na pwedeng mapursige yung mga manggagawa, yung una ay sa panahon ng gyera o panahon ng national o local emergency na diniklara ng Kongreso o ng Executive Department.
So employers can in a way
be
compel.
forced. But this is something that's not clear, I think, to a lot of employees because some of them sometimes meron na silang plan na they'll go home for a daughter's birthday or a friend's birthday and then the employer suddenly says, hindi pwede, kailangan mag-overtime ka. And they think that this is mandatory agad or they might, it's a ground for them to get fired. But at least now, thank you Attorney Sonny and Representative Rene for clarifying that it's not mandatory, it's only under these conditions. Na
Or
if there's an emergency, if it's part of your collective bargaining agreement.
Tapos kung may perishable goods yata, di ba?
It is necessary to prevent life or to prevent loss of life or to prevent destruction of property.
So yun pwedeng yung mandatory.
Lalo na yung panahon ng, sabi nga, emergency, panahon ng flood, panahon ng earthquake, or mayroong volcanic eruption, yung ganyan.
But what types of employees are covered by this 8-hour work period? Because we know that, for me, for instance, as an associate in a law firm,
You work 24 hours.
yes, para on call. I was on call Monday to Sunday, and then sometimes I start work at 8 a.m., but I would end up, my longest work period was starting at 8 a.m. on Friday and ending at 7:30 a.m. on a Saturday. Tuloy-tuloy yun,
24
walang
hours.
uwian, walang liguan. I was working the whole time. So, what types of employees ang hindi po covered nung 8-hour?
Hindi covered ng 8-hour. So, yung hindi covered yan, ang sabi ng labor code yan, yung mga government employee. Kasi hindi sila covered ng labor code of the Philippines. Or yung mga nasa government-owned or controlled corporation na may original charter. Tapos yung mga managerial employee.
Right.
Managerial staff.
Yung mga managerial ba kasama yung mga supervisors? Ganun,
Yes.
supervisors.
Yung mga managerial staff, kasama dyan.
Kasama yan. Okay.
Yung kasama dyan yung mga domestic worker.
Oo, kasi hindi covered ng 8 hours.
Yung mga field personnel.
By domestic worker, you mean kasambahay?
Kasambahay.
Field worker.
Mga
Field
like sales
workers,
people,
yung-
no?
mga sales people na walang control yung kanilang mga employer sa kanilang trabaho kasi malayo sila o hindi sila namomonitor ng kanilang employer.
Mga non-agricultural field workers, di ba?
Ito,
Yung mga sales agents, for instance.
Tapos yung...
yung mga
let's say,
pakyaw o mga persons
by results, by results,
by results,
by
yung
results.
pagbabayad sa kanila.
yung mga ano, yung mga let's say mga doctors sa ER or let's say yung mga lawyers. Ako as an associate ako sa law firm before, tulad ni Karen, I worked one whole weekend na pero walang overtime pay yan. No? So,
usually ma-categorize na sila as a managerial officer, managerial staff sila.
Yeah,
Kasi,
even if you're just a first-year associate in a law firm.
because independent judgment yung kinakailangan at sarili mong kusa. Hindi ka masyadong
So,
sinusupervise.
Attorney Sonny, can you please clarify, what does it mean to be in a managerial position? Kasi akala na iba, basta pag tinawag na manager, yun lang ang managerial position. Pagka, kunwari, ang title nila analyst or something else, they'll say, hindi naman ako manager. Clarify what that's
Yung unang
that means.
classification ng pagka-manager is if you have the power to hire and to fire. So isa yan sa at least mga kategorya ng manager. O ikaw ay
You mentioned if you exercise independent judgment.
independent judgment at lalong-lalo na directly involved ka sa mga polisiya ng employer.
okay. So yan, managerial yan.
Mga managerial employee yan.
Yeah. Now, going back to my original question on the normal working hours, you said 8 hours. And again, there seems to be this conception or maybe misconception that dapat 8 hours of continuous work yan. Kasama ba yan yung lunch break na kumakain ako? Is that considered normal working hour na I'm paid?
So if you count, kunwari, if you start 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 1, 2, 3. So kailangan umuwi na ako by 4. Yun. So, or pagka magka-count na ng overtime, they can say, it's past 4 p.m., then I should be entitled to overtime. So,
Yung may batas tayo dyan kasi yung dapat mayroong break sa trabaho na 1 oras para sa pagkain.
So considered na
sabi
parang
ng
part
batas dyan ay hindi yan hour of
Compensable.
work, hindi yan compensable.
Okay.
So hindi yan included kasi
included,
hindi yan at the disposal of the management kasi para sa iyo yan yung 1 hour na yan.
Pero meron ding instances, no, kung kasi ako practice ko sa collective bargaining. So, we have negotiated, halimbawa, kahit na 8 hours kami itong tatrabaho, halimbawa, but we have negotiated with the management na lahat ng break times namin, even if abot ito 1 oras for a period of 8 hours, halimbawa, 8 hours work, 3 break times na abot ng 1 oras, kahit sinasabi ng batas na hindi siya compensable. Dahil na-negotiate mo sa collective bargaining agreements, compensable siya.
Yun ang
that's by negotiation.
By negotiation.
Yan
So,
yung
kahit
maganda sa-
pumasok kami sa
May union.
7 to 3, halimbawa, all the break times are compensable. Even if overtime kayo for the next 4 hours, halimbawa, 3 break times for 30 minutes, that's 1 hour and a half. Compensable yun by negotiation. No? Pero sa bata, kaya collective bargaining agreements kasi lagpas sa
mas
batas.
mataas yan, mas mataas sa
And
minimum.
then, how much premium do you get for working overtime?
Okay.
25% more.
Yung sa
This is, maraming rules on overtime Di ba? Yung mga overtime after the 8 hours, overtime during regular holidays, overtime during special days. Maybe we can, taking off on what Karen mentioned, maybe, we'll start off with 25% is for
25% para dun sa after 8 hours.
Lumpas ka na sa 8 hours.
after the 8 hours.
8 hours. Pero, yun, sa collective bargaining agreements naman, pwede tumagpas yan. Sa
tumaas yan.
union, 50%. Kung overtime per hour.
Okay.
Yun ang maganda sa mga yun makipag-negotiate ka. Pero
Lagpas
sa
doon.
panahon
You can get
ng
better.
sa minimum standard doon sa mga holiday o special days ay 30%.
30%.
Plus 30% of your regular hourly rate.
Plus 30%. If you're required to work on a regular holiday?
Regular holiday and
Or your rest day?
or rest day.
Kasi may permutation pa yan Kung yung rest day mo siya, tapos regular holiday pa siya,
Okay. So,
may
kung regular, 50% yun.
50%
Diba? Mas
yan.
50% yun.
So if you're getting, for example, 100 pesos an hour, you will get 150 pesos an hour.
Yep.
Ganun
Yun
na mangyayari.
yung competition no? Kung rest day mo at holiday pa.
And you're forced
Siguro magandang tingnan yung concept of overtime pay, di ba? Yung concept niya kasi is that a worker is exchanging his time for work,
It's free time.
free time, di ba? So babayaran ka. The law says 8 hours lang, no? So in exchange for after working 8 hours, may premium. May premium siya. Additional dun
palagi ko
sa
dyan,
rate, diba?
dinidiscourage ng batas yung pagkaroon ng overtime.
Yeah.
Kaya
What
nagkaroon
about
ng penalty.
Night
para may
differential
dagdag.
po. Night differential pay. If you're a call center worker and your work hours are really 8 hours lang, pero it's 10 p.m.
To 6.
to 6 a.m. the next day, are you entitled to
Mayroon
night
kang,
differential pay?
night shift differential pay na 10 plus 10% of your regular hourly rate.
Rate.
And night differential and night hours, meaning ano yung
From
time na yun?
Yung
10
from 10
PM.
p.m.
10 p.m.
in
to
the
6
evening,
a.m.
hanggang alas 6 ng umaga.
So
Alright, so,
anytime na ganun yung shift mo, then
May
you're
plus 10%
entitled to
ka.
plus 10% of the
yun na.
regular pay.
Ini-encourage yan kasi abnormal yung sitwasyon.
Abnormal nga naman,
At saka maepekto yan sa yung physiological ability o sa yung health. No?
pero si Attorney Karen, pa night differential yan, tsaka day regular kasi she works night and day.
Pero managerial,
Pero
wala.
O siyang may-ari ng kumpanya.
All right, we have some questions from our viewers. Let's answer them with the help of our guests, starting off with Ralph. Ralph asks, my colleagues and I are wondering if mandatory overtime is legal. Ayan. We work in a call center and the management in our department just announced today that we are all required to work overtime this month. They have not told us, yet exactly when we have to do it or how many hours are required. Now, so the question is it legal for the company to force us to render overtime work? I think you answered that earlier, Rene. So, they can say no.
This sounds like a blanket policy na basta this month, you're all required to work overtime.
Hindi dapat ganun mangyari. Ang isang exception pa dyan is to, di ba, to prevent obstruction of the business operation of the company. Pwede yung justification yun. Pero yung parang binigyan mo ng mahabang kapangyarihan na hindi kasali doon sa exception ayon sa Article 89 ng Labor Code, hindi yun dapat mangyari. Kasi o hindi dapat mandatory yung overtime.
Representative Rene, pag ganitong nangyari, what can they do to complain about their employer? Where can they go?
No. At the first place, at the first instance, tanungin nila sa managers nila why do we have to render overtime work? Ano mga dahilan? Then, certain nila kung ilang oras. And then, talk about it with the managers. Kung pumayag naman yung mga manggagawa, okay lang. Ang point lang is that, alam mo ilang oras yan. Kailan gaganapin, ano ang dahilan. Kasi sa labor relations naman, ano yan parang partnership o di kaya takes two to tango, di ba?
But if they don't want to render the overtime work,
they cannot be forced.
They cannot be forced. And if they are forced, saan sila pwede mag-complain?
Mapupunta na sila sa NLRC.
Okay.
In other words, they're forced and they were terminated. They have grounds to file for illegal termination.
dismissal. Okay. We have another question from Sandra. I'm a newly regularized employee. Upon regularization, my employer gave me an increase in my salary. But they insisted I cannot claim overtime pay anymore since I am now in a supervisory position. I only have 1 year experience prior to joining this company, and currently I have no subordinates in our company. So I can't see the reason why I am in a supervisory position. I think they are only using that supervisory as an excuse not to give overtime pay. Can they do this?
So parang
Hindi
ginawa siya supervisor pero actually first year pa lang. He's first year of work. And,
But then based on the definition of a supervisory or managerial position, it's not really how much time you've spent in employment, right? It's based on the functions of that
the
position.
function.
So in this case, I think Sandra has to check ano ba yung functions niya. And I guess, Attorney Sonny, you can repeat. Ano ba yung
ito ba
definition of
related directly doon sa mga yung ginagawa niya related directly doon sa paggawa ng mga pulisiya
policies
employer
ng employer?
right.
or siya ba may kapangyarihan na magtanggal o mag-hire, pero dito sabi niya wala siyang sinusupervise
Parang wala.
o parang walang nangyayari, wala siyang people under him or her, no? Palagay ko kung kasi sa batas naman sa labor code is in case of doubt, you have to resolve in favor of labor. No? Kung hindi klaro dito na supervisor siya or managerial yung kanyang function, dapat entitled siya sa
Overtime.
overtime.
Pwede rin siguro silipin dyan, hindi lang sa definition ng supervisory work, hindi, yung compensation niya. Kung siya ay monthly paid, tapos kukumputin natin kung considered na 30 days paid na siya, even if hindi siya nag-render ng work Saturdays o Sundays, pwede mo makukwenta yun eh.
Right.
Para malalaman mo na ikaw ay supervisory compared to sa wages ng rank and file employees. And plus the functions. Kung ascertain mo, supervisor ka o hindi.
I see. All right. So now we have a next question, this time from Crystal. Is it legal for a company to disallow the use of an employee service incentive leave credit, but provide it as lump sum during the end of the year? Kasi I think the law provides a service incentive leave. I think 5 days yatang...
Maybe
5
we
days.
clarify first what's a service
Yeah.
incentive
Incentive
leave for those.
Sige.
Yung service incentive leave ay binibigay sa mga empleyado na nakapag-render ng 1 taon na serbisyo sa kumpanya. So kung nakapag-buo ka ng 1 taon, ay you are entitled to a 5 days
5 days of paid
paid
leave.
leave. Oo.
Now,
Kung hindi mo magamit ito,
Pwede.
ay pwede itong ma-monetize. Pero ang tanong dito ata
Kung pwede raw bang hindi ibigay, and then
nila lump
lump
sum
sum.
sa end of the year.
Hindi
ilalamsam sa
Meaning, parang ayaw paggamit sa kanila.
Ayaw paggamit,
And then, pinapromise sa kanila na ibibigay na lang namin sa inyo yung lump sum equivalent
Towards
of
the end
the
of the year.
service incentive leave at the end of the year. Is that
Siguro,
okay?
kasi Christmas break normally, di ba?
kung voluntaryo siyang pumayag, walang problema dyan. Pero kung
Kung gusto niyang
gamitin, dapat magamit niya kasi he is entitled to and he can demand that as a matter of right.
Yung rule kasi is entitlement. So, pwede niyang gamitin. Hindi pwede enforce sa kanya, wag mong gamitin.
Right. So this service incentive leave is over and above the vacation leave that is
Iba pa
given
yun.
every year by the employer, no?
Sa labor code kasi 5 days, no? Pero kung may practice sila other than that, ay yung pwede kasi yung vacation leave, halimbawa na 15 days or 10 days, ay pwede na makredit doon sa doon sa
Service incentive
leave. In other words, the employer is already giving 15
So if the
days.
company, for instance, has a policy na all employees are entitled to 15 days vacation leave, then it already complies with the requirement of the law na 5 days
Kasi hindi
service
compulsory kasi yung
Yung
Hindi
vacation leave.
vacation leave. So kung sabi ng employer na yun na yung inyong vacation leave ay yung service incentive leave yun, compliance na yan sa batas.
Okay.
Kasi mas mataas yan, 10 days kung 10 days.
Yes, oo. Thank you for clarifying that for our viewers. For now, we'll take another short break. Legal Help Desk will return after these messages. You're still watching Legal Help Desk on the Solar News Channel with our guests, Representative Rene Magtubo of the Partido Manggagawa and Attorney Sonny Matula, National President of the Federation of Free Workers.
Good evening again. Ngayon, we were talking about work hours, no? And I think we've been able to clarify na yung when it comes to managers at saka who's covered by those that mandatory 8-hour rule. Ngayon, may circumstances naman na the employee sometimes does undertime. Di ba? Nag-undertime. You have to leave at 5:30. Umaalis sila ng 4:30. Yan ba can they credit that against the overtime that they do naman?
Yeah, or can an employer say, look, this month, dahil maluwag naman yung trabaho natin or magaan lang, you've only been working for 7 or 6 hours this whole week. Can they say that we'll lessen your pay for this whole month because you only worked a certain number of hours?
6 hours.
Klaro yan sa ating batas na yung overtime ay hindi pwedeng i-change mo doon sa
Undertime.
yung set sa undertime.
What about
So, no offsetting.
reducing the pay because
Kung
mas konti yung
nag-undertime ka,
trinabaho?
babawasan ka. Kung nag-overtime ka, bibigyan ka ng premium.
Okay. But undertime, can be a ground for lessening the pay or reducing the pay of an
Of
employee.
course, kasi kung no work, in
No work,
prinsipyo,
no
no work,
policy.
no pay.
No work,
Kung
no
hindi ka
pay
nagtrabaho,
policy.
wala kang bayad.
Okay, so at least for all the employers out there.
Pero kung nag-overtime
If
ka,
you're-
dapat
oo.
may additional premium ka.
Okay, so pagka pala hindi naman umaabot sa 8 hours, they can say, this month bawasan natin yung bayad. But if it's a managerial or supervisory employee, and mas magaan yung work nila for a certain month, they cannot reduce the basic pay.
Of course, kasi hindi naman sila cover doon sa doon sa office hour, hindi naman sila cover kasi mga managerial employees.
Let's say an employee will use as justification, wala naman akong ginagawa, naghihintay lang ako eh. So, since wala naman akong ginagawa, wala naman yung boss ko, uwi na lang ako ng 4 o'clock. The question is, yung waiting for work, is that considered work and therefore he's required to work, required to wait until 5 o'clock? In other words, can he just leave at 4 o'clock kasi wala namang pinapagawa sa akin?
Siguro, kung walang pinapagawa, problema na ng management.
And management cannot say na, okay, wala naman kayong ginagawa up to 3 p.m. Nung simula 3 hanggang 5, wala naman na kayong kinailangan gawin, babawasan namin yung bayad sa inyo.
Hindi kasi kung...
Kasi yung
ay
paghihintay
part
of work,
and you are on call, tawag nun na you are at the disposal
of the
employer.
Okay.
So you cannot, hindi ka pwedeng umuwi. Hindi ka mo magamit yung oras na yon para sa sarili mo. So dahil kinakailangan ka or on call ka, you are at the disposal of the company, although you are not actually working.
So the times na sinasabi natin kanina that you can reduce the pay of your employees, of your rank and file employees for undertime, that's when they go home earlier and they're really not waiting anymore. Paano naman yung mga nasa office nga pero nagpe-Facebook lang or nag-internet lang? Can they say that wala ka namang ginagawa, then therefore I will reduce your pay for this month?
Hindi pwede siguro gawin kaagad yun kasi kung you're performing work other than those na ibinigay sa'yo, company rules and regulations na bahala sa'yo dyan. Kasi you're using company time from other time, no, na hindi attributable dun sa work mo. So pwede kang kasuhan ng management kung meron sa company rules and regulations nyo na nakalagay doon na dapat itong ginagawa mo for this period of time during work.
Now, if for example, if the business is suffering some losses and I tell my employees, no, in fact, I went when I went to on a vacation, yung effect na hotel sa bandang Visayas, they were telling us, yung waiters were telling us, we were asked to come in na lang 3 times a week kasi wala masyadong mga tourists who were coming in, and so we were told by management na 3 days a week na lang kami because wala nga masyadong mga employees. Can an employer do that to save the business?
Pwede niyang gawin
to compress the hours, no?
Pwede niyang gawin yun, pero process is that they have to talk with the employees. Tapos sabihin yung rason. At dapat ang rason na yun ay talagang kumbaga matibay at may batayan to a reduced work week para sa mga empleyado. Pwede niyang gawin.
Pwedeng gawin yun. Now, the employer is not necessarily required to make up for that in good times. Meaning, kung kumita na ulit yung company, is it required to
implement a 5-hour work week?
I guess to compensate back. No? Yung, since kulang, for 2-3 months, nag-cost saving tayo and yung kulang ko sa mga sweldo nyo, medyo okay na tayo in the latter months. Is the employer required to pay back yung mga in-under time nila?
Wala na kasi on the first instance kasi kung mag-reduce ka ng working hours, kailangan mo i-justify yung cost.
And kung talagang nalulugi,
so you have to file a certain notice yata sa Department of Labor for the reduction of
so
such
kailangan
work.
So it can't be automatic and just say, okay, 3-day work
3 days
week.
na lang tayo, walang yan.
Dapat
justification
may forma
dapat.
actually yan sa Department of Labor na pinifill up.
Alright.
Na ini-inform na ito ay napagkasunduan ng mga manggagawa at namin, voluntaryo sila na nag-submit sa voluntary...
To save the business, to save their jobs.
Yeah.
Kasi mas sabi ng Korte Suprema dyan is mas humane yung kaysa tatanggalin sila.
And then, Attorney Sonny, what about travel time? So, if, for instance, you're an employee who is required to travel, pagka, kunwari, normally your 8-hour work week starts at 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. But then, because you're traveling to some other place, you have to leave the house by 6 a.m., be at the airport by 7, and then buong araw ka nagta-travel. although of course you're just sitting in the plane for either 2-3 hours, can the employer say, well, dadating ka lang naman dun sa meeting mo actually at 10 o'clock. So, 10 to 3. Dapat yun lang yung babayaran ko. Or can that person ask for overtime since if he leaves the house from 6 a.m., kasama na, from there you start counting 8 hours. How can an employer say kung alin lang dun yung babayaran niya ng overtime? Or what can the employee demand in terms of compensation?
Usually yung travel time papunta sa opisina, hindi yan compensable.
So to and from
your home to the office, hindi yan
counted.
compensable unless na mayroong palisiya kayo na may bayad yon, or may collective bargaining agreement kayo na may bayad yon. Pero yung mga trabaho mo na nag-require ng travel, so you are performing your work in going to a certain place, that is compensable. So dapat babayaran ka niyan.
It's in the nature of work. So, ang basic rule doon is, anong nature ng work that covers travel? Diba? So, kung ang nature ng work may covers travel, compensable yun.
What types of employees would have travel time that is not compensable?
Kalimitan sa amin sa rank and file, di ba? Punta ka sa trabaho, hindi naman compensable. Kahit na bibigyan ka pa ng service buses ng kumpanya, from point A hanggang sa kumpanya, ang travel nun, hindi compensable.
Yung mga ahente po, yung mga sales na laging pumupunta sa either provinces outside Metro Manila to
Yung
sell.
mga sales personnel naman, pwede yung makover ng yung field worker.
Yung field worker yan.
Na hindi sila...
Kasi minsan nag-happy hour yan with the client, di ba?
Yung mga field worker, fiction sila. Fiction kanilang amount. At hindi na sila binibigyan ng overtime.
Yeah.
Kasi ang prinsipyo dyan, hindi sila nasusupervise ng kanilang mga employer because of the nature of their work.
I'm curious, no? Again, in relation to overtime, no? There are two questions that I'd like to ask. No? One is that yung overtime, hindi automatic yun. Meaning, for example, if I did not require my staff to render overtime.
And they're still in the office until 8 o'clock.
I'm not required to pay them overtime, right?
Of course.
Diba? It's only upon, in other words, the employee will have to apply for overtime, di ba?
It must be approved by
management.
the immediate supervisor.
So what if they have a deadline? For instance, sinabihan sila na, please give me the draft of this memo by 5 p.m. today. And dahil mahaba talaga because it's complicated, you end up working until 7 p.m. even if you did not ask for permission from your employer. Can the employee argue, I wouldn't have stayed until 7 p.m. if you didn't require me to submit this memo by today? What would be the argument there?
Kung gano'n ang sitwasyon, alam na ng employer na kailangan niya mag-overtime. So, dapat makompensate naman siya. No?
But pero kailangan niyang kunin yung permission. Kasi paano kung mabagal lang magtrabaho pa nitong tao?
Yung usual dyan na practice is dapat hihingi ng empleyado yung permiso bago siya mag-overtime.
Okay. Sige.
All right.
Helpful
So,
tip.
we still have a few questions from our viewers. Let's answer this query from Cherry naman. I recently joined a company last month. I found out that the company is not providing SL, or sick leave, and vacation leave to the regular employees. We have around 200 personnel. The company has been operating for more than 20 years. The only way I can convince them to give these benefits is to let them know what are the consequences if they will not provide the benefits. Can someone share their expert advice what my company will face in cases that authorities will find out this practice that they're not providing sick leaves and vacation leaves?
Sige ko, siguro hindi na inspection yan. Department of Labor, hindi inabot. Kasi ang case is that 200 employees, dapat meron na-inspect yan ng labor inspectors. So siguro hindi siya na-inspect, kaya hindi nalaman na wala siyang service incentive for the employees. So kapag nalaman niya ng Department of Labor, masasampa ng kaso yung violation of labor standards. No? So, yun.
Not providing sick leaves and vacation leave? Hindi yun?
No. Service incentive leave. Kasi sick leave, vacation leave kasi, negotiable yan eh. Hindi naman automatic. Ang automatic is that an employer rendering 1-year service entitled for 5 days service incentive.
So on sick leave, it's not mandatory?
No, it's not mandatory.
Yung compulsory lang sa ating batas, yung service incentive.
Na 5 days.
So Cherry should check. Kasi baka
kung 20 years na yan, na nagbabiolate yung kompanya, pwede sila mag-complain ng kwan lang, ng within 3 years backward. Kasi may prescriptive period yung mga labor standard claims natin eh. Hanggang 3 taon lang pababa. So, yung mga
For
more than 3
violations
years,
na over 17 years ago.
wala na yun.
Oo,
So,
hindi na,
ibig
hindi
sabihin,
na nila mahahabol.
hindi na mahabol dahil natutulog sila sa kanilang karapatan.
Oo. But Cherry, I think
Deep sleeping.
So dapat talaga you have to have your employer investigated if you find mga practices na baka questionable. But Cherry, you have to check, baka meron na kayong service incentive leave of 5 days. Kung ganon, then baka wala na ring basis yung claim mo na they're violating the law by not giving you guys sick leaves and vacation leaves. And we have another question from Crystal. I'm resigning from my present company, but the HR is giving me a hard time. I presented my resignation letter and the HR will not accept it. This lasted for a week. When I told them I will go to the Department of Labor and Employment and report this incident, he laughed at my face and even went as far as to say that even if we present our case to the Supreme Court, they will not care or let me resign. What else can I do about my situation? Ayaw siyang pakawalan. Parang,
very important.
Oo nga eh, parang,
Lagay niya
parang
lang eh.
forced labor.
Irrevocable resignation.
But is that allowed na, hindi, bawal ka mag-resign?
Yung ating constitutional law naman, involuntary servitude is prohibited. O ibig sabihin na walang taong pipilitin na manatili sa kanyang trabaho kung ayaw niya na.
So labag sa batas to na
labag sa batas
you're being forced.
In other words, kung may illegal termination, may illegal retention. Diba?
Yung kwan dyan, yung at least sa resignation, may klaro yung giya ng ating batas. Na dapat, bago ka mag-resign, ay bibigyan mo ng 30-day notice. Yung iyong employer. May dahilan man yung wala, no? Maliban kung may dahilan yung kanyang pag-resign. Halimbawa, inaharas siya. So,
Pwedeng
pwedeng
agad-agad.
agad. Pero kung wala namang dahilan, kinakailangan ng 30-day notice para sa kanyang employer. Para naman makapaghanda yung employer niya sa kanyang paglisan.
Pagka po ayaw siyang payagan katulad nito, pinagtawanan pa siya kahit daw umabot silang Supreme Court, hindi siya papayagan mag-resign. Representative Rene, saan siya pwede lumapit para maka-alis siya sa trabaho?
Hindi, mayroon namang sa batas just an authorized causes of separation from company. Pwede niyang gamitin yun na mag-file ng irrevocable resignation, sabihin niya doon yung kanyang mga katuwiran ng pagre-resign. Kasi ang fault naman, hindi naman fault, ang reason behind resignation is attributable sa employee. So, bigyan niya lang ng panahon, yung 30 days, notice yung kanyang kumpanya para ma-prepare yung replacement para sa kanya. Yun naman yung concept doon eh. So,
But she can go to the
ay, hindi siya papayagan. Hindi siya magreklamo.
Actually, hindi na kinakailangan pumunta sa NLRC. After 30 days, hindi na siya mag-report.
Hindi na siya magre-report. Pwede na yun.
Kasi yung problema, pagka ayaw ibigay yung mga na-accrue
Ayaw
na
eh.
salary,
Iba yun.
then she can
Iba
go
na
to
yun.
the NLRC.
Ibang ano yun, no? Okay. Now, Lorenzo naman sent us this question. We are hired as regular employees in an IT service provider. Some of us are programmers, while some are system technical support engineers. Our company does not give overtime pay, and they would allow offsetting for those who work for extended hours. They now remove the offset rule, but still no overtime pay. Sometimes you're forced to work for more than 8 hours, even for straight 24 hours during rest days, and even holidays. How can we demand for overtime pay? And what can we do if they still won't give us overtime pay?
Kaso yun, son?
Yeah.
Kung itong mga engineers na ito ay mga rank and file employees, of course, they are entitled to overtime pay.
No, but if you're saying if they're managerial na in nature,
Exempted sila doon sa payment of premium ng kanilang overtime.
So they really have to check yung katulad ng guidelines na binigay nyo kanina. First, check your functions and try to see if you're classified as supervisory or managerial positions. And second, you can also use as a guideline yung compensation, no? If this is equivalent to a managerial or supervisory position or rank and file. Because pagka supervisory or rank and file or managerial, you're not entitled to overtime pay. Pero if you're rank and file, kailangan they can demand the overtime pay. And also, of course, the pay for the holidays. They mentioned working on holidays, working on Saturdays and Sundays.
Kung
And kung
holiday.
24 hours, may night differential pay pa.
Kung nagtatrabaho sila ng holiday, regular holiday, entitled sila ng 200%.
Tsaka may forced overtime element pa sila. Tapos meron tayong epekto din yan sa health niya, 24 hours kapag nagtrabaho. May
talaga.
health hazard.
May health hazard. All right. Okay.
We'll take another short break. But of course, we have to emphasize here, everything that we took up yung kanina sa discussion natin, it only covers non-government employees.
Yeah.
For government employees, they're covered by other rules, as mentioned by Attorney Sonny.
Yung government employees ay sa civil service law yan. So, lalong-lalo na yung mga government agencies or government-owned or controlled corporation na may original charter. Pero yung mga government corporation na incorporated under the corporation code, they are covered. They are considered as private employees.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that.
Alright, okay.
Kasi baka yung mga ibang nasa government, magtatanong bakit kami iba yung practice sa amin.
Exactly.
Okay.
All
So,
right. Thank you.
right now, we'll just take another short break. But before we do, we'd like to thank our guests, Representative Rene Magtubo of the Partido Manggagawa and Attorney Sonny Matula, National President of the Federation of Free Workers. Thank you for being with us tonight, gentlemen.
Maraming salamat din,
Thank you very
Karen.
much.
Maraming salamat, Rod.
And all the best.
Stay tuned. Legal Help Desk will return after these messages. Welcome back to Legal Help Desk on the Solar News Channel. And today we had a very interesting topic because it covers everyone who works.
Yeah, every adult, di ba?
Yes.
Either an employer or an employer. So
Or employer or employee, yes.
Yeah,
And
so it
also
impacts
we
you.
have to qualify that our discussions for tonight were all about employees who are not government employees. So for those watching out there, if you're employed with the government or with a government-owned and controlled corporation with an original charter, you're not covered by all the labor standards that we discussed tonight because you're covered by the civil service rules and regulations. But with respect to the working conditions that we discussed tonight, unang-una, very important, if you're working, tignan nyo yung position nyo. Are you a managerial or supervisory position? Or are you occupying a rank and file position? Because again, yung rules natin on the 8-hour work,
overtime pay,
and overtime pay, holiday
applies,
pay, night differential, it only applies to rank and file employees.
Also, you have to take into consideration that if you are, for example, a field worker, for example, you're in sales, no?
Pag
you're not
field,
covered.
meaning you're out there,
You're
hindi
out
ka
there.
nababantayan
So
ng
hindi ka na
employer.
cover sa 8-hour rule, no? So there's usually no overtime pay. And also, if you're paid by results, yung Pacquiao, tinatawag nilang Pacquiao work, no? Yun, you're also not covered. And I believe there's also some
I think you have to
exceptions.
clarify, pag Pacquiao, iniisip ko tuloy yung
Not
Manny Pacquiao.
No,
Yeah.
no,
Pacquiao
yung
meaning you
work
sell.
for results.
Oh,
For results. Parang may project ka, kunyari you're required to work on this particular piece of furniture and you're paid via, let's say, if you finish 10 of these in a day. So hindi yan covered by time, it's covered by the result. So yun, you're also not covered by overtime work. No? So it's very key. Also, if you're in a BPO and you're working sa night shift, you're entitled to night differentials, di ba? At 10%.
If the work hours are between 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., even if this is your regular work period, you're entitled to what you call night differential pay, and that means you're entitled to 10% more of the regular work wage.
Also, overtime is not mandatory. No? So if your employer requires you to work overtime and if you rendered already your 8-hour work and you say no and then you get terminated because of that refusal, you can actually file for illegal termination because you're not required. You can say no, in other words, to overtime work.
Yeah, meron lang mga exceptional circumstances on when you can render or you can be forced to render overtime work. And that's usually if there's emergency circumstances or if you're, again, of course, if you're working with the government, but also if there's like some form of emergency, like if there are perishable goods involved. So it's not really mandatory to render overtime work just because your employer says so. And again, also for those who are either employers and employees out there, take note that the vacation and sick leaves are not mandatory in terms of being provided to employees. What's mandatory under the law is what you call the service incentive leave, meaning for employees who have rendered at least 1 year of work, they are entitled to a service incentive leave of 5 days with pay. And you cannot force your employee to get the cash equivalent if they want to use this for leave. But if you have also in your company policy a vacation leave or sick leave that allows 5 days or more, then basically you're complying with the requirement of the law na service incentive.
Tapos yung mga compressed work week nga pala, no? So for those employers who, because of, let's say, economic reasons or business reasons, no, medyo nalulugi na, and you want to save the business, the more humane thing to do, rather than getting rid of your employees or firing them altogether, no, terminating them, is to maybe have compressed work week. That is allowed by law, but you have to get permission from the DOLE, from the Department of Labor. It's not automatic. So you talk to your employees. If the employees are willing to have less pay because of the compressed work week, no? So instead of 6 days a week, you work na 3 days a week, diba? So lesser yung OPEX mo, yung operation expense mo on salaries. If you agree with their employees and you get the permission from the Department of Labor, that can be done. And when your business has recovered, you don't necessarily have to compensate for that reduced pay. Again, that's the Supreme Court has already ruled that that's allowed in order to save the business, and that's a more humane way of, I guess, helping out employees kaysa naman mawalan silang work.
Yes. And lastly, for those who, of course, like to eat, and who doesn't like to eat while you're reporting for work, the time spent for your meals are not covered when you're counting the 8-hour work period, because providing a lunch break is mandatory. It has to be at least 60 minutes, but it's not counted when you're counting the 8-hour work period. But if you are, if you're working while eating, then you can count that as part of the 8-hour work period. That's if you're required to work by your employer. Hindi yung, di ba, yung iba kasi pipiliin na lang nilang kumain while working. But you can't force naman your employer to say, oh, hindi natin i-count yun, because...
Yeah, kasi kumakain ka.
Yeah, and that's also key for working overtime. Right. Get the approval of your employer when you work overtime so that you can get the overtime pay.
All right. Now, we've received some questions from our viewers on topics we have previously discussed. Wit asked us, I'm not legally married to the father of my son, who was born in Saudi in 2001. So I'm assuming that Wit is a woman, a lady. He was able to obtain a fake marriage certificate, but it was not registered in the NSO. My son is using his surname. Now I'm legally married to an American. So please advise on the steps what to do regarding the legitimacy of my son. Can my husband adopt him? Thank you very much. So again,
first of all, the falsification, the Wit was mentioning that the husband was able to get a fake marriage certificate. That's called falsification of public documents. So mali yun, that's a crime. And you can actually prosecute your husband for that. But other than that, since hindi naman kayo married, your son is not obliged to use the surname of the father. So you can actually change the name of your son to use your surname.
Since you have parental authority, so you can do that. Yeah.
Yes, and of course, the husband can also adopt your son.
That's right.
And as long as, of course, he complies with all the requirements under law, because he mentioned American eh. So you have to check the Inter-Country Adoption Act, meaning merong mga requirements doon, and so what I would advise is get the assistance of a lawyer so that you can go through the whole process of adoption.
Yeah, so it doesn't fall under the usual rules, no, of local adoption, we call it Philippine adoption, because he's an American. All right, so...
We have another question from Paulo. I had a child with my ex who is now 5 years old. I kept constant contact with my kid and supported him without fail since day one. My kid also has my surname. My question is, can my ex just change my son's surname and or take him out of the country without my consent? Okay. So first question, Paulo. your wife, sorry, your ex cannot suddenly change the name of your son if this is what appears in his legal documents, meaning dun sa certificate of birth. Pag ganon, then the mother technically can change it because you're not married. You're not legally married, so your son is also not bound or obliged to carry your surname. But the mother, kung yun na yung official or legal name ng anak mo, would have to go through the process of changing the name.
It's a special proceeding that you have to file, so it's not automatic na she'll just go there and his own
Or just start using the
or start using
name
it.
of
She has to really go through a legal
the process.
procedure.
Oo, kasi baka mamaya yung lahat na pala yung passport ng anak is already using the father's surname. So she has to undergo the process of change of name for the son.
Kasi hindi to typographical error, di ba? It's not just a clerical error. It's really a change of name. So you can do that now.
Yung taking out of the country
that's a little tricky.
without his consent, that's allowed because, again, your son is an illegitimate child because you are not married and the parental authority is with the mother. So she can take him out of the country without your consent.
Correct. If you're married, both parents have parental authority. If you're not married and the child is illegitimate, parental authority normally resides on the mother. So she can do that. Yeah. All right. All right. So that's all the time that we have for tonight. We'd like to thank our guests who were with us earlier, and our viewers who sent us your questions via social media. I'm Attorney Nepomuceno.
And I'm Attorney Karen Jimeno. If you have any questions on our topic for tonight, you may share them with us on our Facebook and Twitter pages. Join us again next Monday as we discuss your legal rights. Good night.
There are some companies that do not meet the standards of the Labor Code of the Philippines, such as exceeding the recommended number of working hours or not entitling employees to benefits and holiday pays.
Mandato ng Department of Labor and Employment na huwag mawala ang mga trabahong nandiyan na. Pinipreserve natin yung mga trabahong naririyan na at lumidikha pa tayo ng mga bagong trabaho na makakadagdag sa mga pangangailangan ng mga manggagawa. Conciliation, mediation, function ng Department of Labor and Employment is very important to us. Anong ibig sabihin nun? Pinapagkasundo ka agad upang huwag matuloy ang pagwiwelga. Kapag nagwelga, magsasara ang kumpanya, maraming mawawalan ng trabaho.
In cases like these, how should employees empower themselves when it comes to enforcing their employment rights? How can employers uphold the standards of their employees' working conditions? Where can employees go to report instances of violations of the Labor Code?
Good evening. You are watching Legal Help Desk on the Solar News Channel. This show is about making the law work for you by giving legal advice on topics that matter to you. I'm Attorney Karen Jimeno.
And I'm Attorney Nepomuceno. Tonight we will discuss your legal rights. There are different types of employees and we'll touch on those. But siguro we'll focus on yung typical employee and how we define what is normal working hours in I guess, in a work day. Yes.
Under the labor code, the normal hours of work is 8 hours. And that is not only in accordance with the labor code, but it's also in accordance with ILO Convention number 1.
8 hours.
That was adopted in the year 1919. That was the first convention, the respect for the 8-hour.
Attorney Sonny, when you say
day.
8 hours, does that mean that if you go beyond 8 hours, you can refuse to stop working?
Yes, because the normal hours of work is 8 hours. It should be, in normal times, it should be observed. But of course, there are some exceptions.
When can an employer require an employee to go overtime? So I guess we have to make this clear to our viewers out there. If your employer asks you to go overtime, is that mandatory that you have to say yes?
It's not mandatory and it's not compulsory except those.
In cases like these, how should employees empower themselves when it comes to enforcing their employment rights? How can employers uphold the standards of their employees' working conditions? Where can employees go to report instances of violations of the labor code?
Good evening. You are watching Legal Help Desk on the Solar News Channel. This show is about making the law work for you by giving legal advice on topics that matter to you. I'm Attorney Karen Jimeno.
And I'm Attorney Rod.
May 1 is celebrated around the world as Labor Day, especially in the Philippines because on this day in 1903, Filipinos held a rally in front of the Malacanang Palace demanding for workers' rights. In 1974, the Labor Code of the Philippines was enacted into law, governing employment practices and labor relations such as the rules of hiring and terminating employees, the conditions of work including work hours, overtime, benefits, and holiday pays, as well as the guidelines in the organization and membership in labor unions.
Ang batas pagawa na tinutukoy natin ay yung Labor Code PD 446 as amended na matagal na yung naisa batas sa pamamagitan ng Presidential Decree. No? At yan ngayon ang gumagabay sa mundo ng paggawa dito sa Pilipinas. May mga specific provisions yan na which governs the working conditions, labor rights, and everything that has something to do with labor and employment matters altogether. Itong mga karapatang ito ng mga manggagawa, binabantayan yan ng Department of Labor and Employment at may specific rules and regulations governing the exercise of those.
However,
On working conditions, what you need to know as an employee on the proper working conditions according to the labor code and what you need to do as an employer to uphold these standards.
our guests for tonight are Representative Rene Magtubo of the Partido Manggagawa and Attorney Sonny Matula, National President of the Federation of Free Workers. Good evening and thank you for being with us tonight.
Yeah, good evening.
Gabi po.
Yeah, good evening. So Attorney Sonny and Congressman Rene, former Congressman Rene. Rene na lang. Rene na lang. So, well, of course, as we all know, no, I mean, a lot of people are affected by the labor code because there are a lot of people obviously are either employers or employees. And maraming, let's face it, maraming normally mga disagreements or should we say mga conflicts na nangyayari.
Or I think a lot of also unclear notions about rights of either yung employers, what you should give your employees, or even employees what they're entitled to. So
but since labor law is very, I guess, wide no, in terms of scope, siguro with focus more on working conditions, you know, specific working conditions, and siguro we start off with what is defined as yung normal working hours, diba? Kasi